Welcome back, everyone, to the Hard Times Strongman podcast, where we are creating a better class of man. Joining us this week is Mr. Lance from Selous Dynamics. We're going to have a discussion kind of in the general prepared space, but specifically Lance has an in-depth background on a lot of the medical stuff and a lot of the bushcraft stuff, so we thought it would be ideal to bring someone on board that kind of has a different perspective in this whole prepared space. Welcome, Lance. Thanks for being here today, dude.
Hey, what's going on, man? I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate you, man, making the time, because I know whenever we reached out earlier and we were kind of talking, you're a super busy dude with your company and like you're still working. So I really appreciate you making the time. Just for the people who aren't really aware of what Selous Dynamics is exactly, could you kind of just give us a quick brief on what you're doing and kind of your background?
Yeah, man, sure. So this is kind of born, over years of trying to do stuff and even success and failure and all that kind of stuff. And so basically me, man, I started off in the U.S. military. I was in the Marine Corps. I did that for 6 years. That was back in the, early to mid 2000s. Iraq was going on. I went and did that. And after military, I transitioned not well, so to speak, like a lot of guys do. I tried to find what I was supposed to be doing and what I needed to do, kind of bounced around. And eventually I wound up in the medical field, and really don't even know I got there, to be honest. It was kind of I should probably try to go do this and see what happens. And so I did. I got into pre-hospital medicine and became a paramedic and wound up being attracted to the law enforcement side of the house locally and assisted with them and worked as an operator medic with them. And then did that for about a year and a half. And after a while, kind of was like, okay, saw that side of the house and what was going on. Decided it was time for me to move on and do something else. And now I still work full time, obviously as a paramedic in the field. And I also work as an EMS educator. So I teach EMTs and paramedics and all that kind of stuff. And I also obviously teach with Selous and as far as getting that kind of stuff done. So to me, it's kind of a combination of being able to teach working professionals in a certain realm. I really like enjoying doing that. I have a real passion for that infrastructure, first responders and how that works, but then also being able to teach everyday guys and gals on what's going on. And to me, that's a lot of fun, especially seeing the combination of those, because a lot of the classes that we do will have all walks of life. We'll have people who are just everyday people. We'll have people who are first responders. They mix together and they bring their particular strengths together, and we think and problem solve, with everybody's walks of life and the background and all that kind of stuff. So,
oh, that's super awesome, man. Because I know here up in Canada, all the medical stuff is very separate. So there will be people who have a similar background to you, not nearly as extensive, but they'll try and run medical training for normal people. But then they'll have classes specific to first responders or normal people. They don't have a blending of it. So I like that you're doing that because it's kind of normalizing it for everybody.
Well, and I'll tell you this, man, and I've said this in classes a lot, and sometimes it may offend people or it may not. It really doesn't matter to me on that. But the problem is that if you're a working professional as a, quote, first responder, you're actually not the first responder. You're generally the second or the third responder. The first responder is the person on scene when it happens. And that's generally just everyday people. If you're a witness to the event, you either have a choice. You can be a bystander or you can be an asset on that. And so what I would seek to do for a lot of people is train them when that event occurs that they can actually take part in what goes. And kind of one of the things I try to bring to the table is something called an all hazards approach, right? And all hazards basically meaning that there's not something that you're not willing to do if you have the training. And if you want to stay in play, you're able to do that. And that obviously means if there's a violent conflict involved, and that's why you're there to begin with, as far as, out in public and everyday world. If you carry your arm, you're prepared, you want to get in, you want to play, and you want to do that, then that's on to you. That's the training to do that. But also the biggest thing too is providing, medical care that needs to take place at that time, because most of these events, that's the reason we have the death count that we do, especially in the States with, these active killer events. A lot of times, we're looking at a picture where first responders, again, quote, first responders, especially medical services, are not being allowed to go into these scenes. They're not being able to work these scenes. And, if you look at all the data from all of these mass CAS events, the Secret Service is basically stating that the average response time for law enforcement is somewhere to 4 to 6 minutes, to get into the door, to find out, to make contact with what's going on. But the first average response time for a medical provider is close to 50 minutes before they're able to make contact. Because unfortunately, and I say this truthfully, unfortunately, we have this thing where law enforcement in the States really does like to lock down on things. And they are very authoritative on what they're trying to do, good and bad, right? We're not going to try to get into a pro-cop versus, un-pro-cop conversation. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and we all have room to improve. But what's occurring is they're saying, well, you're not trained to go into a dynamic situation. You're going to have to wait outside until we clear it and we allow you to come in. And that problem is twofold. The problem is on the shoulders of people that I work with, that work in the actual, within the infrastructure in the system, because a lot of them are not trained to get involved in that type of dynamic situation, right? Some of them don't want to. They're like, that's not my job. I didn't sign up to dodge bullets or whatever. I signed up to work medical calls, and which I understand. You're not going to force somebody into the room. But at the same time, it's important to realize that there are people capable of doing it, and we have to be smarter and more capable to be able to get in there and make that happen, because that's the only way. If you're going to take these events and you see all these people that are dying, very few of these people are probably dying right when the event happens. Most of them are dying because they're left there bleeding out. They can be salvageable, and they're not. By the time somebody gets them, provides care, they are no longer sustainable as an actual casualty to survive. So,
yeah, no, and I don't even think it's like being a negative aspect to bring it up. Like you said, not pro cop versus against the police or whatever. It's the reality, because you see it full time as a paramedic, that sometimes you show up and you're kind of kept separate because they have to secure the scene. They're so focused on other stuff. They're so narrow-minded in whatever the scenario is. And then, like you said, by the time actual medical care arrives, it's significantly slower than when hopefully the police show up. But like you said, the reality is that air quote first response is usually a prepared citizen. Hopefully, if there's a prepared citizen there. So no, man, I really like that approach. And it's like a big holistic picture. You're trying to encompass the broad picture to make it realized to the most people, regardless of what uniform you wear, or if you don't wear uniform, that this is the reality. And like you said, and I say this all the time, you're either creating an asset there, or you're just a bystander, just kind of chilling, and you have a story for later. You're not really helping people.
For sure. And, unfortunately, most of it these days is pull out your cell phone and start filming. It's not a call to action. It's not a call to, put something in motion. And, a lot of people here in the States carry a gun. They do. And obviously there's places where it's more prevalent than others as far as laws and viewpoint and, ideology and all that kind of stuff. But the issue is that while people, carry weapons, very fewer people actually train with those weapons as far as, really getting out there and actually getting combative with it and stuff. And then the issue is that even fewer of those people practice, medical skills and then carry the ability to use those skills. Well, there's not a whole lot of room on the body to carry everything, right? And that's the problem. By the time you carry a gun, you carry an extra mag, depending on what you're carrying. You have a knife, you have a flashlight, a lot of just normal everyday carry items. Where do we start putting the medical stuff? How do we carry that around with us without, imprinting and, kind of drawing away from our activities and not being able to just walk normally because we're loaded down with some kind of kit? So there is a trade-off there, what are you more likely to do? You more likely to get in a gunfight, or are you more likely to be able to respond to some type of medical, some type of medical need there? So it's really going back and trying to balance that and trying to rework the problem and figure out statistically what are we going to be involved with and how can we make the best response in doing that. And, that's like the American Heart Association here. Obviously they're worldwide, right? They're teaching CPR all over the world, and their initiative was, hey, the best way we could save lives is to train people to start performing CPR immediately on scene. Well, the same thing I believe should happen as far as grassroots on any type of trauma as well, is that having people on scene immediately, that it's not unusual for something to occur and have somebody able to negate the threat, if applicable, and then immediately start providing medical care as far as hemorrhage control and some type of trauma understanding that's going on. And I believe that that's an attainable. I believe it's an attainable goal. If enough people get in the right mindset and they get on board together, then we can actually help and make something happen. To start fixing some of those things. So.
Yeah, and I think just highlighting the reality of it, and that, like you said, if you're carrying a firearm, why would you not carry medical? And I know I've talked to a lot of people now about the EDC world, again, because in the States you guys are fortunate enough to carry a firearm. I'm like, if you're carrying a firearm, why would you not carry some form of medical equipment with you, right? But like you said, it's that balancing act where they're like, well, now I'm weighing down, I'm carrying too much stuff. I'm like, yeah, but your most likely event is probably something medical, or your most dangerous. You do get in a shootout, you probably want some medical kit on you at some point, even if it's not for the person. It could be for you, it could be for, your loved one with you. It's just this crazy thing where it's very like sexy now to get all the EDC stuff, but no one wants to like buy a cool trauma kit, you know what I mean, and carry it on them, other than like, oh, I have something in my car, or I have something in my bag, but my bag's in my car and it's not on my person, right? It's very weird that other people aren't normalizing this. So it's really great to see, man, that you're taking it as the bigger picture and you're explaining, okay, well, this is your most likely, actually, probably something medical.
Yeah, and we always have that whole, I guess the quote could be used, my gunfight. Everybody has that in their mind, what it's going to look like, how it's going to go down. They see it in their mind when they train. They think about it, and they're always the good guy in the picture, right? Because that's how that works for us, and we're always going to win, right? Because that's how we like to think about things. We never like to think about failure. We only want to think about us actually doing the cool guy stuff. But, a little bit of dark humor that I use a lot in training is that I often say it's a contact sport. Somebody's going to get hit, and the issue is that you may very well be the one who's going to get hit, because we have to be good. The bad guy just has to get lucky a lot of times. Statistically, if rounds are flying, there's a good chance that somebody's going to get hit during that time. And, the closer the quarters, which we've signed the contract, if you're out there carrying a defensive weapon, a handgun, knife, or whatever, you literally have signed the contract saying that I'm looking to get into some type of close quarter combat. Whether it's going to be in a small building, a small room, inside of a vehicle, around a vehicle, this is where I'm going to fight, and it's going to be close in nature. And obviously that's a very dynamic skill set, and I believe that, a lot of times the gun's not even enough there. I feel like we should be training with the blade. I feel like we should be training with unarmed combat, some type of martial art. If not, I try not to use the word combat sport, because I don't want to get down a rant, but I don't see those kind of relating a lot of times.
Yeah.
We need a no rules type of application in fighting, but mixing those three together and bringing that to the table. And you're absolutely right about the med kits and what you can take and all that kind of stuff. So we generally go to Disney. I know that's kind of odd or whatever, but sometimes on vacation, and a location like Disney has a very strict policy when it comes to no weapons on the grounds. Everybody goes through security screening, all that kind of stuff. The Pulse nightclub shooter actually screened Disney. That came out from his wife afterwards. She told the investigators. And he was attempting to bring in a rifle, a AK-47 in a stroller, and he saw that it was too stringent, as far as the actual screening. So he decided against it and picked another target. I will tell you this though, going through security there many times, one thing that I always bring in is some type of med kit, and it generally will have a tourniquet. It'll have chest seals. It'll have pressure bandage, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of times they don't even blink when they look at it. Or someone with some type of prior service or, law enforcement, whatever, will look at it and go, oh, okay, cool, a tourniquet or whatever. And they'll like, just keep on going through. So I say that because if you're operating in some type of non-permissive environment and you can't carry some type of weapon, generally I've never been to a location where they're like, no, you can't bring in med supplies. That's generally never an issue. Even traveling out of the country and going to places, it's generally never an issue. And getting on a plane, it's not an issue. So
I think it's just, again, this will be bold to say, I think it's a laziness thing. I think it's sexy to pay for a shooting class. It's not sexy to pay for a med class. And that's the reality. People professionally or, prepared citizen, they don't want to do it. And I know for me, I saw it a lot here, man. like the military or law enforcement, we weren't given med kits unless you're on deployment, like overseas on actual like combat operations. Like in Canada in training, we weren't provided medical kit. So guys became complacent. It just wasn't part of their kit. And then on the law enforcement side, again, depending on what agency you're with and what funding is, my agency, we didn't even get issued tourniquets, man. And I bought an IFAC and I built my own and I carried it on my belt. And I got like to the point of they were going to reprimand me for breaching dress policy because it wasn't issued. That's like insanity to me. So I fought them every day and I'm like, yeah, you know, go screw yourself. I don't really care. And then I'll tell you what, dude, the amount of calls I've been to where a medical's happened, I'm the only guy showing up with a med kit. And like you said, the paramedics, we didn't let them in. I'm just still fighting someone, or, you know, we're securing the scene, or like you said, God forbid, by the time we do let the paramedics in, that person's already expired. And I'm like, well, I had a med kit on me, but everyone else is caring about policy, or they're so focused on what our next weapon system is we have to carry and train with, but medical gets dumped every time. And it's just insane to me that people do that when you have the luxury to do, like, buy medical, buy training.
I saw, you know, in my personal experience, especially when it comes to law enforcement, was the ability to be a super consumer was very real. Mm-hmm. A lot of times some new toy or some new tool was going to fix all of the tactical doctrine. And I disagreed vehemently with that and said, no, training is going to fix this. You know, at the end of the day, if you've got a good pair of boots and you've got a good rifle, let's start with that. Let's work our way, because, you know, it's always going to be, you know, skill set versus tools. It's always going to be your, you know, software over hardware on this kind of deal. If you got a guy who knows what he's doing and you train them thoroughly, it doesn't matter what you put in their hands. More than likely, now some things obviously will give them advantage. We understand that, but more than likely they're going to perform that mission just through their understanding and knowledge alone, no matter what the tool is. And so that obviously was an issue. And even the medical was, you know, something that was put on the back burner. And I thought that was kind of crazy to me that was occurring. And, you know, obviously vocally making the push of saying, hey, we need this. This is what we're going to get. This is what we're going to do. Every person needs to have this. You know, we're going to do a train the trainer where, you know, guys know how to perform these basic skills. And then we only rely on our medics to be able to do higher echelon skills, you know, and doing that. And there's still a lot of guys that, you know, you talk about like placement of gear, something that's so simple. You know, you get your IFAC and a lot of people are, you know, where they put it and what's in it or whatever. And, you know, my personal gear, the way I have it is, a lot of people would probably kind of laugh at it because like, well, where's this and where's that? Okay, well, here's the issue. If it's the front of my body, I'm going to go with a very low profile system, you know, because I'm not going to perform surgery on myself if I'm hit. Mm-hmm. More than likely, that's not going to occur. The best chance that I have, if I'm hitting the extremities, I will apply a tourniquet or tourniquets, depending on the situation, and I will probably be able to get a chest seal on, or, you know, even a trauma bandage if I need to. But as far as doing a needle decompression on myself, never heard of anybody doing one on themselves before. Maybe it is. If somebody knows, send me that anecdote. I would love to read that. So, you know, all this type of gear should be then repositioned. Mm-hmm. I like to run on the front of my kit, basically what I call a blowout kit. You know, I've got the ability to stop bleeding and I can treat immediate life threats like that. It's going to be a bandage, it's going to be a tourniquet, and it's going to be a chest seal, if not more than one. But for the other stuff, that's going to be higher echelon care. You know, that's going to go on the rear of the body so that someone who's coming up to me who is trained can use that on me, because I'm probably not going to be conscious enough to do those things or even know what's going on while that treatment's taking place. Or I'm going to need someone who has their complete faculties about them and that are not injured to perform that for me. You know, that's what I need there. But we see a lot of that. You know, a lot of IFACs out there just have a bunch of stuff just shoved in them. And, you know, here's the problem. I didn't like being told, you know, especially when I got out of the military and then look at training, where people would tell me, well, you're not a cop and you're not military. There's no reason we can't teach you this. We can't show you this. I was like, well, it's really not classified. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, you're not going to show, like, any of this is open knowledge if you want to find it somewhere. But they had this kind of, you know, this arrogance about it. You can't learn that. You can't have that. So I try not to bring that to the table. But I will say that when it comes to medical things, there are certain medical procedures that you're going to need to have a particular level of training and professionalism to perform. You know, you wouldn't go and say, well, I can't really afford a doctor. I'll let my buddy, perform surgery on me. A lot of people will probably say, no, I'm probably not going to do that, But when it comes time to an IFAC, we're completely fine of saying, okay, well, this guy took a TCCC class 5 years ago and he put a needle into a dummy. So we're going to let him carry that. And now he's going to perform a needle decompression in a back alley somewhere on someone who's actually injured in a dynamic environment, whatever. Honestly, that's not realistic.
No.
And we have to ask ourselves, do we want that to happen or do we want to? So we really have to say, if you want to operate at a certain level, just like with everything else, you need to be attaining that level and keeping that level of training professional and whatever. Do I say, oh, well, you need to be doing this full time, you need to be, this or whatever? No, but you have to take that responsibility. I feel the same way when a person carries a gun. If you're not someone who is out there training and really looking at realistic applications of gunfighting or whatever, then I would be super hesitant for you to pull that gun around me in that environment and be operating with that, because I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know where the hits are going to be. I don't know what the collateral damage is going to happen. And obviously you are responsible for that. You can't take the bullet back. So, you have to ask yourself, am I capable of operating at that level, whether it's violence, whether it's medical, or whatever aspect that it is. And that takes a lot of self-searching, and it takes a lot of humility to say, I'm not really at the level I should be doing that, and I should be pursuing, this, and I should be getting better at it. So,
yeah, it's just crazy that even again on the professional side, medical seems to be something that gets dumped, or like you said, they'll find a piece of gear and they think that replaces training. And I know from the military, right? We had like belt kit or a chest rig or plate carrier, but when you switch to LE, all we had was an external plate carrier. They were very controlled with what I could put on it, so I had most of my crap on my belt. So I bought the Blue Force Gear mini IFAC thing on the belt. I had that, but it was totally marked and identifiable. So either, like you said, you could see me from behind and be like, oh, there's his IFAC, right? Like that's what it's for. So I think there has to be that form of at least a baseline understanding. Okay, you have to have it clearly marked, but in like you said, in relation to what you're carrying where, that shouldn't be a thing, because they tried to band-aid it and say, okay, everyone put in your left cargo pocket. I'm like, yeah, but what if I don't want that in my left cargo pocket? Having a tourniquet and combat gauze, what if something happens to my leg and I can't get to that now? You know what I mean? It's not marked. But again, they didn't give us any training. They literally didn't even show us how to put on a tourniquet. They just gave it to us in a bag and one thing of combat gauze. They're like, oh, you're good. And that was just their solution, right? Like you said, the gear thing. They're like, well, we're going to buy it for 600 officers and we're covered now.
And honestly, and sadly, that's pretty normal, especially in your more rural areas. The smaller the department, the worse that seems to get. And even here, locally, here's just a kind of a case of instances that I've had. We make sure, especially in the professional medical pre-hospital community, we actually are called upon to teach a lot of law enforcement officers. They'll bring us in to teach certain stuff, whether it's like Narcan administration or bleeding control, all that kind of stuff. So there is that aspect. And then we also, obviously, for myself, I have a lot of law enforcement officers who come to Selous classes and get into those and want to go higher and learn more stuff. But, I still have instances where I'll get out on a scene and I see a guy with gear on and there's no med on him whatsoever. And I'm like, hey, man, where's your tourniquet at? I know that you have them. I was there when they were issued. We did training. Oh, yeah, it's in the car. Okay, well, what's the chances if you get hit, what's your chances of making it back to the car? There was another incident where there was one particular agency that, like you said, would not allow them to wear tourniquets because it was not viewed as being part of the dress policy. They didn't like, but this same agency wanted to do a female empowerment. So they sent female officers to go to this conference. And when they came back, they requested pink handcuffs.
So my agency did that too. If you're a female and you wanted to support a cancer thing, you could rock pink handcuffs. But I got told no tourniquet.
There you go. And so they were like, yeah, of course you can. This is inclusive. You can have, this female pride, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being a woman, obviously. I'm just saying that,
it's not a priority.
Good for the goose is good for the gander.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you can skimp on this, by God, if life-saving things, we should. A couple other things that I see is that, even with the branded tourniquets, I'm a cat guy. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
so am I. Yeah, so am
That's
I.
what, yeah,
They're the
I
best.
just
They've been
can't
proven to
reinvent.
be the
Yeah,
best.
I can't reinvent the wheel. I'm not sponsored by North American Rescue at all. I do have friends that work for them, and I do buy a ton of gear from them or whatever. But the thing is that I know that the cat's going to work. I've used them many times on individuals and have seen them, never fail, never had an issue with that. But then I look at the other, even stuff that's COTC approved, and if you're listening to this and you don't know about COTC or whatever, it's the Council on Tactical Combat Casualty Care, and it's a group of doctors and medical professionals that they give guidance on best practices. They're not the law, they're not the rule. They just give guidance on best practices. And COTC will review gear and they'll say, okay, we support these because they are showing data, evidence-based medicine that they're going to work. And COTC even has, multiple recommendations for tourniquets. And one of the other ones, we see is a soft wide. And even I've seen failures with the soft wides. And one of the big problems about them is that one of the things that law enforcement officers like to do is, since it doesn't fold as neatly as the cat does, they will take it and they'll, press it real close together and then put rubber bands or ranger bands around it to hold it compressed. Well, the issue is that when you now take that apart to go use it, you have bands on it, which how are you going to deploy it one hand now? We always should be teaching and practicing the one-handed application of tourniquets for ourselves if we're hit. And so number one, how are you going to deploy it? The second thing is, once you get those bands off, since it's been compressed like that, the actual nylon band develops a crease in it. And if you want to, you could try this out at home if you have one. Store it like that for a while, pull it out, and then go to try to now apply it. Whenever that crease goes through the buckle, it wants to hang and stop. You can't pull any more out of it. So from what I've seen in the real world is most of the applications of that tourniquet have all been loose. You'll get to them and it'll look like spaghetti on top of it because they turned the windlass 1,000 times trying to get the inner band to tighten because the initial pull never got the slack out of it. And so a lot of times, and this is what I've had to do, on patients that were applied, law enforcement applied tourniquet, was actually cut that tourniquet off and go higher than that and put a cat on it, to get it where it needs to be. And so, again, you need to test your gear and ensure that it is what you think that you need to be running and make sure that it's applicable. I like to throw problems at everything I have, gear-wise, tactics-wise, whatever you want to talk. And the reason being is because we got to be honest with ourselves. And if we're throwing a problem and the gear or the doctrine is failing, then instead of fortifying that failure, we need to be backing up and making a change on it. We need to be flexible enough to say, hey, that didn't work. Let's get better. Let's go move on to something else. And our gear definitely is one of those things that, I hate to put it as simple and I hate to be, kind of whatever about it, but, med gear is something that has been tested and it literally, like the lessons are written in blood, you know what I mean? It's something that people have lived there or died because of how well that it's worked. And so why are we still ignoring that particular data and just continuing on with it? The homework's been done for us on that. We can go ahead and take those recommendations and best practices and move forward, so.
Especially like out of the uniform for the everyday prepared man. You can make your own SOP. You can do your best practice. You can figure out what works for you. Whereas, again, like the example I used, and even the department you said, it comes down to politics. It comes down to money, and money's not even a thing because if I was working a place where they said we don't have any money straight up to provide any medical training or provide you with gear, but if you take medical training, we'll give you time off. If you wear medical gear, we'll let you wear it. We'll do whatever you want. But the fact that some of these agencies are so dead set against med because they're like, well, we're not medical professionals. I'm like, then why am I carrying a firearm? Why am I responding to some of these calls like we said earlier, where I'm going to beat emergency services there, and then now you're just looking at me like, oh, well, we don't have whatever training, so it's fine. It's just a weird complacency thing. But again, for the people not in uniform, medical is a priority. Medical is something you should really kind of care about, especially if you're carrying a firearm.
For sure. And, the thing is I've had individuals tell me, well, no one has sent me to that training. Well, no one has allowed me to do this or whatever. the thing is, as a just your person yourself, that's your responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't be your agency's responsibility to train you. It shouldn't be your department's responsibility or whatever. That's on you to go take your time off and go take classes and go find it. And it's out there. Now there's different levels and degrees of training that you can find and that you can get a hold of. But a lot of it's out there if we choose to look for it. And as far as just everyday people, hopefully now we're getting into that place. And one of the biggest reasons that I started Selous was that, back before I got into doing pre-hospital medicine, I was working in the gun business. I was a gunsmith, and all the time was coming into contact with people of all walks of life, and a lot of these people were more defense-minded, I guess is the best way to put it. They wanted to carry, they wanted to train, or whatever. And I was talking to these people and saying, okay, yeah, and I would even help with firearms training or whatever. And back in those days, especially if you look at the evolution of social media, especially Instagram, you would see that back in the 2015, 2016, this was the days of, these massive blow-ups on this and that, and these, all these accounts and all the garbage a lot of times that get spewed. And there was a lot of information that was really hard to choose from because it wasn't really what was best. It was what was trendy. It was what was cool. And we see that that's perpetual. That happens all the time. Even now, thankfully we've moved into a time where people are starting to look more grassroots on things. They're starting to look more at the softer application of skills as far as survival, bushcraft, foraging, all that. I think it's amazing that one of the accounts I follow shows that they're going into the military and teaching foraging skills and how to process game. Back when I was in, 15, 18, almost 20 years ago, that would have been insane to think that somebody, a civilian at that, would be coming in and teaching skills like that to these individuals or to us. So thankfully that's happening. But we have to be careful to keep that proper momentum and to not let one of the worst problems I see is that consumerism. Just like I saw in law enforcement departments, you now see that in social media. It's always been there. It just rears its ugly head whenever any type of movement starts getting traction, where it's buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this. Where it's like, nah, don't do that. Train.
Yeah.
There's got to be a better way. We got by. Man fought and did it really well before automatic weapons. Man fought and did really well before night vision. Man fought and did really well before GPS. Now obviously technology has a place in our skill set. I'm not saying that it doesn't. And whenever you try to say something about technology and about the consuming of that technology, people want to jump all over you about it. Well, what about this? Well, what the old saying, if my aunt had a dick, she'd be my uncle.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? The problem is that we can what about everything to death, but we need to be focusing on that skill set. We need to be working on getting better. Yes, okay, if you want to own a GPS, outstanding, own a GPS. However, what about a compass? Do you know how to navigate? Do you know how to read a map? Do you know how to plot grids? Do you know how to triangulate locations? Do you know how to do terrain association with mapping, micro and macro terrain association, dead reckoning, anchor points, all these things that are very important in the concept of navigating. If you didn't put any precedence on that and you just went and bought a GPS, yes, I will now have a device that tells me exactly where on the earth I am if there are GPS satellites in availability that are working. And I could put in another point and say, take me here. And it will say, great, here's a straight line that's going to get you to this point in space. The rest is up to you. But I hadn't talked about, hey, well, I can't go because there's a river that's impassable, 4 kilometers in front of me. I'm going to have to circumnavigate that. Or talk about the concept of, hey, this is going to take you directly through a defile, which is going to be the perfect place for you to get ambushed. Those things are not considered. So I look at the same thing with all the other technology. It has to be one of those things where we are having to make sure that the tactics determine the tools, not the other way around. We have to make sure that the software, the person who's able to do it is there first, and then we move and we supplement that with hardware. And honestly, again, we have to take that. We got to throw our problems at it. You got to make sure if you want to run technology, how are you going to keep it in motion? Well, there's batteries everywhere. There are batteries everywhere. I understand that. What is your availability on those batteries? How often can you resupply that? Can you recharge them? What happens? Batteries have a shelf life, and a lot of people, well, I'm not going to be in that type of event. Don't come around telling me that you're not going to be doing something, because I learned the hard way. You learned the hard way. A lot of people have. When we said we weren't going to do something, we got taught a lesson on that. And so you never know what you're going to be operating with or how. And you need to be able to be flexible in that doctrine and use the things that you have. And one of the things I really tried to do is, if I have a piece of kit that I say, well, I couldn't do it without this kit, that's a bad place to be. If I could not take anything that I have and lose it, bury it, toss it, and walk away from it, that's an issue, right? Because that shows how we're sticking to an item and our survival is revolving around that item instead of ourselves. We should be able to pick up anything that we can and try to improvise as long as we can until we can improve our position, until we can improve our station and our protective posture with that. So anybody out there, let's say, no matter what you're being told about consuming and having to buy and having to do this, you need to be comfortable saying, no, I think I'll just get training, and then I'll figure out if that tool is going to work within my tactics. And if we started being a little bit more level-headed about that, I think that we would see a lot more growth. But if not, again, we're going to continue to repeat that concept of, well, if I just buy this, I'll be fine. Yeah, that's not going to do. I got to buy this, and I'll make it. I'll buy the GPS because, hey, I've got the GPS. Everybody else is going to be lost. Hey, I'll just buy the nods because, you know what, I may have no understanding of tactical doctrine. I can't survive. I can't patch a bullet hole. I couldn't put two sticks together in the woods and do anything, but I'll be able to see at night. I'll kill you. You can't see at night, and I can. I'm like, man, that's not the conversation. That's not even the argument that's being had there, So
I think it's just, again, it's ignorance, and it's equally to blame, like social media and consumerism. I mean, we live in a day and age where it's cool to like everything and share, but just like we said, how many people are actually signing up for whatever course or signing up their family for whatever course? That's actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you. So for some of the training you're doing on your own with Selous, and you have it to open to anyone, do you have like a minimum age, or would you let I'm not saying super young kids, but again, because you're just not tactical, you're the bigger picture, would you train like a teenager in some of this medical?
Yes, we have. We do, and we have.
That's awesome.
And so
that's awesome, man.
Basically, I appreciate that, and I believe in a family first doctrine.
100%. That's awesome, man. No, I just have a question after you say why, because it's good to hear that you're doing it for kids.
Well, and that's the thing, is the way I look at it is, a lot of times if we're going to get into trouble and you have a family, that's who's going to be around.
Yep.
And, we have that bad habit where we tell the women and the wives, and sometimes the husbands, depending on, sometimes our wives are more, into it than men. I've seen that before. And they're just like, well, she doesn't need a gun. I'll take care of her. And I'm like, bro, things go down. What are you, Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston?
You need all hands on deck.
In the fight.
Yeah, you need all hands on deck right now.
In the fight. Yeah. And it's going to be family combatives, right? We need to be able to tell your kid needs to know where to go, what to do. Hey, I need you to do this now. You should have even a kind of rehearsed concept with your family of saying, hey, if I say this particular thing, I need you guys to start locking into gear, and this is what we're going to do. And there's we're going to be firing on a whole different set of cylinders at that point in time. And that way they're not sitting there, what do I need to do? What's going on? Asking a million questions of saying, hey, no, this is what we do. Muscle memory. Let's roll. And so I like bringing that in. And a lot of times what I do is that, if you sign up for a class with us, you get to bring a family member for free.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, so why would you
like
not?
A spouse
or a kid.
Right.
Yeah, why would you not?
Or whatever.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
And I'll tell them about the age, is that it's really up to you. If you think that they're mature enough to handle the content, bring them. I'm not going to change the content. Yeah, just because they're there, but you have to take that in stride and see if they're ready for it or not. And some of the ones that are younger, man, they have a blast. I could imagine when I was a kid, if my dad was taking me to classes and we were, taking real chunks of meat and wound packing, or we were out tracking or whatever, I would have loved that.
Yeah, exactly.
So
no, that's super awesome, man, and that's why I wanted to ask, because I know, again, I know it's different in every state or even in every province in Canada, but I tried to get my son signed up for a first aid course, and he was 12 at the time, and Red Cross in Canada would only let him do like the BS level A babysitter course. And I said, no, I want him to do CPR level C. And they're like, well, he has to be 16. I'm like, why? I'm like, give me a reason why he can't do it. And then their explanation via the phone was, well, most 12-year-olds can only handle the babysitter level. So I laughed and said, well, my 12-year-old can do more. So I want him to do level C. I don't know why you're limiting what he's allowed to retain, because so what? I'm going to pay you twice. He's going to do a babysitter course for 1 day, level A, CPR and first aid, which is a joke. And then I'm going to make him do level C later. Like, that makes no sense. I'm like, he can comprehend it now. So that's why I wanted to ask, because you don't see that, man, often where people are including, again, like 12's not super young, but like younger kids, or they're including their spouse. And I like you brought up the shooting thing, because that's the biggest thing now, where guys are like, they'll spend the money on training for themselves, but they're like, well, my woman doesn't need that, or my woman doesn't need a gun, and she's got me. I'm like, that's insane, dude. There's 4 people in your house. You all need some form of training.
This week's episode is brought to you by FieldSeats.com. FieldSeats.com is an e-commerce, federally licensed firearms dealer. They provide virtual reviews on brand new firearms, optics, and gear, where at the end of the review, they give away the item being reviewed to an attendee.
Currently, they've got reviews ranging from the Shadow Systems MR920 for $35, the Springfield M1A for $65, or Trichicon ACOG with RMR for $60. Each review has limited seating, so your chances of winning the giveaway are that much higher.
Check out FieldSeats.com to purchase your reviews and enter to win the item being reviewed, and use code STRONGMEN to get 10% off your order.
Be sure to check out their Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at field_seats for updates on products and other tips and info.
Use code STRONGMEN to receive 10% off your entire purchase at FieldSeats.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Thanks for listening, guys. Now back to the episode. Stay in the fight.
And honestly, too, one of the biggest things I've seen is that a lot of times the wife, the female, whoever, they don't want to train because it's not geared towards them. Now, I'm not a big proponent. I see a lot of companies, especially in America, they do like, oh, it's a women's firearm class, you know. And I'm like, I'll be honest with you, that is sexist. And I'm not even a person to use that word. What you're saying is that women are so not capable of performance that we have.
You got to lower the standard.
Special,
I agree.
Yeah, we got to give their own special inclusion class for that. And I'm like, nah, this is equal opportunity. We're all going to get out here together. We're all going to learn together. And you know, they feel like, and I'll be honest with you, I think that a lot of times men are more geared towards the mission, so to speak, in quotes, because that's part of their natural drive as a man. You know what I mean? A lot of us obviously are born with the instinct to, you know, beat on our chest and protect the village wall. That's kind of ingrained to us from a young age. But females are obviously more, for the most part, obviously the nurture type of application where their mind doesn't kind of gravitate towards that. They don't think in those type of terms or whatever. And unfortunately, it's probably one of the reasons where, you know, females make up most of our violent statistics, you know, when it comes to the application of them either witnessing or being the victim of violence. So I'm like, you know, let's don't do that. Let's give them a mission. Let's help them understand whether you're doing it for your kids, you're doing it for yourself, for self-preservation. Let's provide that path forward. And it doesn't have to be women specific. It can be everybody learns about this and everybody moves forward with this. And so a lot of times we have females that come in and they will perform excellently in classes. Once you psychologically give them a reason to operate, they generally will pick up and operate at the same, if not exceeding the level to the man to the left and right of them.
That's awesome.
And some of the best shooters you see generally
are women. A lot of them now. A lot of the competition shooters, they're women, and they could kick dudes' asses. Yeah,
that's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool to see that, you know.
No, and it's awesome, dude. That like you said, you're not separating, you're not excluding, you're not saying this is mil only, this is LE only. You're like, no, you have a pulse and you're a human. You can take a class, and I'm going to teach you some stuff.
I refuse to do mil only or LE only classes.
That's awesome.
I will not lock off, and I will not tell someone, no, you can't do this because you're not this. I've even been approached to teach classes for departments, and they're like, yeah, but we can't have civilians in here.
You're like, no, I'm not your guy. That's awesome, man. No, like super respect, Lance. So. That's solid. That's something you're holding down. And like I said, dude, it's rare now. You don't see it. Everyone's just trying to make $1, or oh yeah, I'll make a women version, or yeah, I'll make one for kids. I'm like, like what? So what? This 13-year-old can't comprehend what this 30-year-old can? Like that doesn't make any sense.
That's exactly right. And that's where it is. And a lot of times we see some of the guys that work professionally in fields, whether it's law enforcement or whatever, I've seen it with my own eyes that a lot of times they are hesitant to perform because they refuse to let anyone see them fail.
Yes, I've seen that.
And when you're that type of person, you terrify me. If you cannot fail in training, because that's where it's supposed to take place, the old saying, amateurs practice until they get it right, professionals practice until they get it wrong, and then they fix it. I'm a firm believer in that. And when you won't operate to the level that your wheels come off, then I don't really know how to take you. I don't know what you're about.
You're not an actual professional at that point.
That's right. I want people to see me miss on the range, and they'll be like, "Well, that guy missed." Yeah, but he was going at 200 miles an hour and he found a failure point. He did the feedback on it, and now he's going to fix Y, and now he's going to improve upon that. And collectively, we have to be doing that because training in general, we always train at what we're already good at. You ever notice that?
Yeah, so I had this discussion with Chris Cook from Odyssey. He's just got a shooting company in Utah, and he was saying that as well, that's his biggest takeaway he tells people is people want to train what they're good at, not what they suck at. So he tells people, no, sign up for something you're not good at because everyone wants to do what they're really good at, but you're never going to progress.
That's right. Get outside that comfort zone.
Yeah.
And so with me, man, the biggest reason that I started Selous was because during that time of seeing these trends and these fads or whatever, it became apparent that here in the States, you couldn't spit without hitting a GWAT vet that was teaching a basic rifle class.
Yeah,
like they're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
You know what I'm saying?
Or some off-duty cops training intro to pistol.
Sure. And my thing is like I don't have a problem with that. That's more people. That's more force multipliers. Get out there and train or whatever. But when I looked around, I was like, okay, well, what else is going on? Like there's other skill sets, and this really come from my time in the military that I thought being in the military, they were going to teach me like all kind of legit stuff,
Yeah.
And then I go to training and I'm like, what the hell have I gotten myself into?
Did you guys do TCCC in the Marine Corps back then when you were in, or was that later on in the GWAT TCCC?
That was before. Yeah, when I was doing it in the Marine Corps, we actually had the Combat Lifesaver program.
Okay, yeah, the old one, yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't do TCCC until I got out and was doing it on my own.
Okay.
And actually did that. And then I went through a spell where I was actually working for, I live in Georgia, and so I was working for the state, teaching TECC, which is the Tactical Emergency Casualty Care, which is more in gear for
like citizens over like war,
citizens, paramedics, firefighters, cops, all that whole concept. Very much the same, but it doesn't go into
care under fire, or like some.
Well, no, it does care under fire. It doesn't go into prolonged field care. It doesn't go into administration of meds afterwards and how to do a complete packaging of patient transport and all that kind of stuff.
Okay,
it's basically meant to do active killer situations and the immediate response, doing a handoff to
a paramedic.
Okay, that kind of stuff. That's right. But so yeah, I'm watching all this stuff, and I'm like, okay. And obviously, working in the gun business, I have a lot of people who are like, hey man, I'm looking. I was like, well, and I taught a lot of people. I did private lessons, teaching, taught people, pistol, rifle, whatever they wanted to learn, and I enjoy teaching that kind of stuff. I still enjoy teaching that now. I sometimes help. I got a good buddy of mine who runs a company called Remnant Group. If you haven't ever heard them, look, he's a super great guy. And I'll go often and help him teach classes because to me, it's fun to do. I enjoy doing that. And I learn something every time I watch somebody else do something, But for the most part, I was like, that's not what I want to get in there. I need to find something else. And I started thinking about all these skill sets that I thought were severely neglected. And that's what I went after. So I kind of walked away from the training,
like the gun side,
concept.
Yeah,
because everybody's doing that or whatever. I got to move away from that. I want to go in the opposite direction of where this train's headed to see what's out there, and that's where I really hit the whole, hey, we need to be doing survival, we need to be doing bushcraft, we need to be doing tracking, we need to be doing land nav, We need to be doing all of these skills that have really, 200 years ago, people were innately good at this because it was relevant to their survival, and that's what I'll tell people in the survival courses. It's like, I didn't make any of this stuff up. I didn't invent this. Like, people have been just doing this through the evolution of who lived and died for the last thousands of years. And this is where we got to on this. But it's just that we don't have it in touch with that. We don't see that on a daily basis or have to rely on it. So a lot of times that, we're not capable of harnessing that and doing it. And so that's all it is bringing back those old skills. And I'm a huge proponent of that. I love reading any type of anecdotal stuff from, guys or whoever that have survived somewhere, throughout the ages. And you look at like dudes like Frederick Russell Burnham, if you've never heard of this guy, he's amazing. And he started off as a young child, and he actually is in Michigan, and the local Native Americans there were on a war party. And this was in like the early 1860s or whatever. So the Civil War was actually going on at the time, and they burnt his homestead, and his mother was there with him by herself, and she went and buried him under green corn shucks so that he would not catch on fire, and had to go run and hide and then come back and get him afterwards. So this dude is growing up hard from an early age, and he went on to, become a world-renowned tracker, and he was hired by militaries. He went and spent time in Africa, fighting in the wars there, and what would become Rhodesia and all these other locations. And, learning about that, how he tracked at nighttime on all fours, literally on hands and knees with no moon, putting his hands into horse hoof imprints and realizing which one rider he was looking at, because there was a slight crack in the horse's hoof, and he could feel that in the track. So he's tracking one horse out of a group of many out in the pitch black on hands and knees. Now, I'm not advocating that practice and saying that's what you should be doing, because there's a lot of dangers of tracking at night and doctrine and all that kind of stuff. But it's interesting to see what people have done before us.
Yeah, and almost how far we've gone, like the other end now. Like you said, the GPS is the prime example. People want to buy it, but they don't even know how to orient a map to the north.
For sure. And you got to be extremely careful with any technology, because I'm even guilty of it myself. I try to limit my screen time as much as I can. And the reason being is because we have proven that the more that you look down at a phone, the more that you are doing that, you start losing the ability to have enhanced observation. Your long range, short range observation skills, your ability to pick up on detail, all that stuff starts degrading the more time you spend on screen. So if you're listening to this, I would tell you for sure, take time, put the phone down, walk away from it, go outside, go observe, go
touch grass, touch snow. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And even look up, drills or daily drills to improve eyesight, focusing on short and distant targets, and actually, trying to harness that observation skill back and work on even smell, hearing, all that kind of stuff. We can become attuned, and you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. I remember being in the military or being out in field exercises, and, you're out there for a couple of weeks at a time, and then all of a sudden you can smell like the whiff of perfume.
Yeah.
But it's like miles away back to where there's normal people.
Yeah.
And you become so attuned to being in the field at that time. Cigarette smoke, campfire smoke, or whatever. It's just like a stark reality to what the normal environment is. And, we need to try to keep in touch with that as much as we can and try, because it is a skill set on its own.
Did you guys ever do Kim's games in your unit?
Okay, so it's great that you said that. So
I do that with my kids.
We specifically did not do Kim's, but I was very familiar with the concept, and it's something that I use now in all our tracking classes, because in the tracking classes we do enhanced observation. It's like the beginning of the class, because I believe if you can't observe, you're not going to track well.
Yeah.
And we do an observation stand where we have a big cone that goes out away from you, and there's going to be like 20 to 25 items in that area.
Are they all the same theme for your observation?
No, they're not. They are actually random objects.
Okay.
One can be like an old cell phone, a canteen cap, a boot, whatever.
You're doing the hard way. You're doing it really hard. It's
well, it's surprising because a lot of people go out there and they'll hit so we do it before, right?
Yeah,
they go out there and they do it cold, and they look and they write down everything they see because they have a time limit. And I tell them you observe at different levels, standing, kneeling, prone or whatever. And then we'll go through teaching at AMPS observation, let them come back, and the number that they find exponentially increases.
Yeah.
Now, in the past, I have done similar Kim's games where I developed, say, for instance, a folder. And on the folder, when you open it up, I've taken items and either taped or glued them in. So it just opens up in a flap, and you have, 20 seconds to look at it and memorize it and then close it. And then try to recall, what it is that you saw, remember it, because I'm a very big believer in active recall.
Yeah.
In dynamic situations, a lot of times we lose the ability to process data, and it's extremely dangerous for us, right? Because we need to be able to, even though things are heavy and hot or whatever and what's going on, I need to be able to look down at a table and see a particular item that's relevant to data, that's relevant to the mission, and then continue to move on, remembering what it is that I saw even afterwards. Because once we start looking at the concept, that's why I'm such a large proponent of tracking to begin with, is because our combat operations should be heavily supported by the ability to hunt, right?
Yep.
And that's, I think, what we forgot. We forgot that going after guys and try to kill them is actually hunting. We tried to make some sterile disconnect between that, and that doesn't work for us. And we found out the hard way, obviously, in the last 20 years that a lot of people had to pay the price in blood because of that, and we still do. In law enforcement operations, one of the things that I enjoyed the most was manhunts, fugitive recovery, and actually going out in deep, because I live in a very rural environment, going out into that rural environment and literally having to hunt that person. And that is the most dangerous game. And that is, you have to be on point when you're doing that kind of stuff. And, all the details, all the data points to what's going on. And that's the beauty of tracking. You start off with a single disturbance in the natural state, and then we're following up, we're confirming, that we actually have, our sign that's actually definite sign. This is what we're looking for. And then in my mind, I'm going to continue to follow them. I'm going to watch their gait, I'm going to watch their pattern, their footwear, everything about them, the way that they grab a hold of a handhold and make a certain rub, a certain wear in the shoe, that tells me something about them. And what I try to do is I try to build that person up in my mind. I'm literally building them from the foot up, because if I can start tracking them long enough, hopefully I can get to a point where I start figuring out what they're going to do before they know what they're going to do. My objective is to think like they're going to think and predict where they're going to be, how they're going to be, and learn how to, or obviously plan to interdict and make something happen there. And that's the beauty of tracking. And it can go just as absolutely deep and esoteric as you want it to. That's fine if you want to do that. But at the same time, it's not hokey. There's a definite science to it that works. So
no, that's super awesome, man. And I'm glad you guys are doing the Kim's games. And for the people listening who are confused on what a Kim's game is, I looked it up while we were speaking on the actual kind of history behind it. So it's from a book called Kim. Did you know that as well, Lance? It's from a book.
Yeah, it's a Rudyard Kipling book.
Yeah, and
the man played it with a child.
Yeah, he played it with a child, and it was very he was a British guy, and the kid was a slave. Like, I'm just going to call it like it is, and he was in India, and he played a game with him, and he'd make him memorize jewels, and then whenever the kid would memorize these jewels, he'd feed him. The kid was poor, and then during the war, when the war broke out, he ended up using the kid as a messenger. He used him as a runner. And that's what it was. He could relay information because by playing this game, and the boy's name was Kim, and he called it a Kim's game. And then in modern society now,
keep it in mind.
Yep. Yeah. Keep in mind. Yeah. And in modern society now, they started with kids, like Boy Scouts, like little kids will do it. Again, military units do it. Specifically like recon or sniper platoons, like it's very common there. And then obviously like the SF side, but. Yeah, so whenever I was just looking up as you were speaking, that's what I was saying. When you did 25 and you're not themed, I'm like, man, you're going hard on these people. Because I know when we did it in my unit, we started, it was 12, and it was all the same theme. And we had 2 minutes to look at it. But we wouldn't do the exercise right away. We would, get shown it, let's say 7 in the morning as an example. We do our normal day shit, and then we do some crazy ass PT session at the end of the day, and before we'd get cut, and then we would do it. Yeah, so it'd be hours later, but it was always the same. It was always themed. It wasn't the same theme, but the 12 items could be from the same theme, and that's what it was, right? And then we based it on why things are seen, right? So like size, shape, color, contour. Well, obviously you can't do sound because you're just looking at it, but you had to guesstimate the most detail you could, and it was always timed when we did it. And no, it's awesome, dude, that you're doing that for your training as well. And again, for people listening, you can normalize it with your kids, and I'll give you a perfect example. When you're driving, you're kind of doing Kim's game with cars, and not even like super details on cars, but you can be, okay, how many Toyotas did we pass? Or, what was the color of that last van we passed? Stuff like that. And it's like you said, it's the observation, and you're kind of normalizing it again and putting reps in, because like you said, everyone's so plugged in now. Everyone's so into their screens. Like, this is a lost art, which, like, I love you brought up earlier, man. 100 years ago, this was totally normal. This wasn't like an SF skill set.
That's right.
Normal humans were doing this because they had to survive.
That's right, for sure, man. But no, that's kind of just one of the things that goes on with that. And kind of, people ask me, why do you teach what you teach? Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, it's because it's what I believe, me personally, makes up the skill sets needed.
Yeah.
Right. To know how to track, to know how to navigate, to know how to survive, to know how to use that in combination together. I definitely believe the old Yagyu Minonori quote about the samurai. It's easy to teach, or easy to be able to cut someone down. It's next to impossible to keep from being cut down yourself. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we do teach lethality. That's one of the things that I'm 100% proponent. You need to know how to fight. You need how to, work your weapon. You need to be accurate and be extremely violent. That is no surprise at all. I will never downplay that. However, in my opinion, that's about 1% of the equation. The rest of it that you need to learn is how not to get killed.
Yeah.
And that means multiple threat vectors, whether it's medical, whether it's long-term sustainment and survival, all of those things, and even the medical, man, is that, yes, I teach a lot of combat trauma, okay, for sure, because that is the bulk of what people are geared for with active killer, or whether law enforcement or, other pre-hospital, even hospital providers. We do teach that. So how to perform that activity and those skills. And, that is I won't say as simple, but that is to the point of a tourniquet, to, wound packing, to chest seals, to needle decompression, even all the way up into getting into like surgical airways and, higher echelon care of individuals. That's there. But, the other thing is that we need to be thinking about, how do I stay healthy long-term in a non-permissive environment? Do I understand just basic physiology of the human, the needs and what we have to have? How does hygiene come into play? Thinking about, hey, if you can't keep germs out of food and you can't keep your body healthy, you're going to die just as sure as you would a bullet wound. That's not going to change anything. So I think the conversation on that deserves to have a more long-range approach with it as well. Being able to continue on with that and continue to study. There's a great book out there. It's called Ditch Medicine. I don't know if you've ever heard it before.
No, I haven't.
To it, take a look at it. Try to find it. It's written for like austere applications. I've read it and I think it's amazing. It is not normal as far as what you would see in modern medicine, but it's great. It talks a lot about using sugar.
Okay.
For wound care, making poultices and all that kind of stuff.
So kind of like Civil War stuff, because I know they did a lot of that in the American Civil War.
Yeah, Napoleonic War and stuff. Really big. Yeah, they really started to try to like introduce even like almost what they thought was a crystalloid at the time, but wound care with sugar, and that. Now you got to be careful, because what happens is, the reason that they're using it is, and I don't want to geek out on med, but I do want to talk med. If
for
what's
sure.
going on. If you have a wound, okay, let's say for instance, it doesn't matter. I was taught the easy way to remember was a keyword CALIP, CALIP, crush, abrasion, laceration, incision, and puncture. Now there's other different types that fall into that, but the most of them are made up of that. When you develop whatever type of wound that it is, the severity of that wound is generally determined by the depth of it and how much structure that is damaged, how much vasculature that is open, how much you bleed, et cetera, et cetera. Now, on that end, the more you bleed, obviously, physiologically, the more you're going to downgrade, right? Mm-hmm. Because obviously all bleeding stops, whether you stop it or it stops itself, it eventually stops. But with just the wound care itself, if we have wounds that are jagged, they're not clean, they're not, good channels, they're not cut, it's going to be very difficult for that wound to heal, right? So if you think about, if you had like a hand or a foot and it was shot and there's a hole in it, that hole does not want to heal. Holes are very difficult to close up because we need that tissue to come together and we need a granulation to occur on that, right? Now, here's something that you can put kind of in your toolbox on this. Generally, the window on that is 6 hours. If you can't close a wound within 6 hours, you actually have to let it heal by what is called secondary intent, because the granulation is occurring in the cells, and it's turning into those keloids in that scar tissue at that time. It's changing itself so that it can develop that. So that means those cells are no longer wanting to close back together, to heal together and provide that particular vasculature across that. So anything after 6 hours, you generally don't sew that up unless you come in there, you numb it up, and you actually cut that out to make that wound channel clean and then suture that back together. So with those irregular style wounds, the use of the sugar, what it does is the sugar goes into the wound and it's covered, and it creates an anaerobic atmosphere. So you remove all of the oxygen from the surface area, which means that we remove the ability for bacteria to form there. All right. So the problem is that eventually the sugar is going to mix with the fluid, right? So the plasma or the interstitial fluid that's coming out of that location, and it's going to want to turn into a goo, So around 12 hours, what you have to do is now clean that wound out, get rid of that, and then pack with dry sugar again.
Okay.
So it is continuous that you would have to do that. If you let it sit up and turn into that, it's going to definitely turn into infection because of that mixed process that's going on. And what's weird about it is that if you have some type of sucrose, glucose, dextrose, whatever the sugar application is, if it gets inside the tissues itself, it's actually necrotic. It will cause the tissue to rot. So the fact that we can use it on the surface and change it out is amazing that works to begin with. It has been shown that that's applicable and that it'll work.
It's a balancing act for sure, though, like you said, because,
It is. All things in medicine really is in the end of the day, though. It's all about, trying to find some type of homeostasis every time, whatever we're doing. Now, if you work with us and you're a pre-hospital provider license, that you have to stay updated. You cannot be employed, actually, if you do not maintain, like BLS, CPR, and there's a ACLS, Advanced Cardiac Life Support, and others, at certain levels as paramedic. But even our law enforcement officers have gotten to a point where we get a call and they're like, hey, can you recert some of our people? And it's like, okay, well, when did they go out? Oh, no, they went out like 6 months ago. And it's like, bro,
you got to redo all of it.
You're carrying an AED in your car. A lot of times, you could be on a scene first, depending on what's going on, doing CPR. Like, how are you not current? Being the person who says, I'm about to expire, I probably should take it upon myself to go get recertified. We go back to that conversation. It's not your department's responsibility to train you in the end of the day, right? That's up to you to maintain your own skill set. So but no, we see it.
It's just very weird, right? In the uniform world, and I know for me, I tried to seek out any form of training that was not just first aid or CPR. And again, it's Canada. Whatever sources there were, they're like, well, it's only MIL or LE. And I'm like, okay, well, I am LE. And they're like, well, is your department paying for it? I'm like, no, they're not. That's why I'm doing it. I'm like, they're literally not doing it. Here's my badge number. Here's my ID card. Literally let me take it. I'm not even going to bill my department. I just want it because I see the need for it. And first aid and CPR is like another easy sell, right? Like literally kids can take it, and people, just like you said, in this consumerism community, they'll find the guy on Instagram for a shooting company or a tracking company or survival over a medical, which is, again, it's insane to me that there's not more people seeking this out. Do you for your medical specifically, do you have, because you're like local to Georgia and like you are a full-time paramedic, do you have like a classroom where people come to you, or do you travel to them for the medical specifically?
It depends on what the classes are.
Okay.
Right. So a lot of times I teach in levels. So I'll teach the concept that I use is ACTC. It's Applied Combat Trauma Care. And that's just the name I slapped on it.
Okay.
That's what it is for branding purposes, for intellectual property, for even I have to deal with continuing education hours for individuals. We submit documentation and they have it approved and all that kind of stuff. But under that, there's modules. And so I'll do a basic life support module where we'll teach CPR, we'll teach regular first aid to people if they want to do that. And then we have just a hemorrhage control module, where we do nothing but tourniquets and wound packing. And then that moves into the other levels as well. And, once we get into that, I have what is the ITR course, which has probably been the most popular, and it's the immediate trauma response. And that's built off of a scenario-based training.
Oh, nice.
Where, you come in for for a full day, and you start off with, learning hemorrhage control, you're learning about shock and all this, why it's important, wound packing, skill sets, and then we start learning about extraction, how to rig webbing on individuals and pull them out of places, how to do that. And then we start learning about how to develop plans, how to look at a structure and do casualty collection points, thinking about where we're going to do our handoffs at, moving into an area that's in danger, and then how to negate the threat, and then start prioritizing, finding and treating and triaging patients, and then pulling them out, extracting them. Now, in the end, we're going to do a full shebang. We're going to have people come in and they're going to have moulage or makeup on. Mm-hmm. They're going to have wounds, and they're going to be role players. And we're going to put you in environments that are very unfriendly. So if you're that type of person where, you like to get into some weird stuff, that's what's going to happen there. There's going to be a lot of sensory deprivation going on. There's going to be a lot of sensory overload going on. And you're going to have to go into that environment. There could be threats, could not be threats. And then you're going to have to find them, treat them, pull them out, and do all that kind of stuff and get ready for a handoff and doing it. So that's generally how the med classes work out. So now,
that's super awesome.
Wise, we always look for venues, right? Because the classroom is great, and there's certain things we can get, but I try to move outside of the classroom as much as I can in everything I teach. If we're doing bushcraft survival, we need to be out there. If we're doing medical, I'd like to try to use appropriate facilities. The more basic type of stuff, you're fine. We generally find people who want to host classes, and we can use a business, we can use a church, we can use whatever it is that you want to use there. But then when we start getting into the more aggressive stuff, we start looking for larger commercial buildings of use that, you can change the layout. Even if you take two of those classes, they're two different classes because of where, you're operating in the building and doing that kind of stuff. So,
how long have you been doing Selous now in general, in the broad scope, between medical and all the bushcraft and survival? Because you've been a paramedic how many years now? Sorry, how long have you been a paramedic?
So right now I've been working in pre-hospital medicine for almost 5 years.
Okay.
Is where I'm at with everything. And I started Selous actually when, during COVID is when the thought came to mind. And I was teaching with a group, like I said earlier, and was teaching with our state here on doing some stuff. Mm-hmm. And I started thinking, and I was like, man, there's just some things I don't really jihad with about this, and I'd like to do differently. And while I'm doing that, I would really like to teach a lot of other classes at the same time. So the opportunity presented itself, and I stuck myself out on a limb there and said, hey, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go for it. And I did, and haven't really looked back from it since then. Now, I've curbed some of the class as far as scheduling wise on certain things, just because you grow, you figure out what works and what doesn't. And I'm not a full-time training company. I still work, normal jobs, plural kind of deal, and I still have a passion for doing that stuff. So I have to make sure when we plan that it's going to be a class. You can get people in the class. It's not going to be too often, not enough, that kind of stuff, whatever. But I try to go more in specializing on what I see that people really want to get into and what they really want to do and offer that kind of stuff. So, but my thing is, I've always told people, I don't believe you can specialize in everything. I don't consider myself perfect at any particular skill. I don't see myself as being the man, the subject matter expert on anything. But what we have done is, if people have a request for a certain type of course, I'll find that person and I'll bring them in.
Yeah, smart.
We'll host it for you, because I like learning whatever you want to learn about it. I want to learn about it too. Let's do it, and I'll get in there with them. We'll figure it out and learn together. But we're just trying to grow a community based, and a lot of these guys, all these people that come to the classes, they meet each other and they're like, hey, let's hang out.
Yeah.
Let's trade numbers. Let's get together. Let's
train.
Let's kind of build. Yeah, let's build a community and share ideas. And hey, have you seen this? Hey, let's go take this other company's class. And I tell people 100% of the time, like, I'm not the jealous girlfriend. Like, if you like other companies, and go take those classes for sure. And the cool thing about it is, if you go take those classes and you're like, man, they're doing this, come and show me, because I want to learn.
Yeah.
I want to see what's going on too, and try to learn as well. So yeah, that's just kind of what we're doing, man. And I try to be really an includer, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, my problem with a lot of training that I've done was that I was like, why am I giving this asshole my money?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you get into these classes and the instructors treat the people like dirt and they're condescending. And, you know, I'm like, good God, man, like, you don't have to be this way. We're literally giving you money for the knowledge in your head. You think that you could be slightly polite about it.
It's the difference again, though,
like,
between like an instructor and a leader. And I use those two words very drastically, right? Like you can be an instructor, but then there's like, you could be the leader. And a lot of these other companies are just, you're paying for their name, right? The guy can't really teach you even how to boil an egg, let alone how to do that skill. Or like,
and that's
they just don't do it correctly, right?
And that's the adage, you know, that I've seen as well, is that it's often difficult because there are lots of dudes out there who are extremely capable and who have great backgrounds and experiences, and they have experiences that are 50 times greater than mine, you know. And the issue then becomes, how can you convey that to someone else? You know, and I'll give you a slight anecdote. I was working at this location down in Florida for a while, and there was some really, really high tier guys that were, you know, working in this location and teaching. And these guys, you know, had probably laid down more meat than Chuck Norris. You know what I'm saying? Like, these guys were bad dudes. And you listen to them instruct and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, this is my takeaway. This is whatever. And then you hear some things sometimes, and it's like, I feel like we have to be a little bit more careful on this approach here, because it becomes almost so nonchalant that, yes, you can operate at this level and you have the experience or whatever, but you can't expect someone who's day one to understand the totality of what you're explaining just because it's simple to you.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And one of the comments that was made is, you know, they were like, it was a CQB, you know.
Of course
like,
it
well,
was.
if they do this, and the guy was... They're right, because that's the only thing.
That's the only thing to learn is CQB and how to tie off your knots.
All you need to know is CQB.
Yeah,
that's it. And the guy said, you know, oh well, he's like, just shoot him in the foot. And everybody's like, what? And he's like, yeah. He's like, you can't believe how many people will, you know, leave the doorway with a foot. He's like, you don't know how many times I've shot somebody in the foot and they fall on the ground and I shoot them in the face. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, man, I understand what you're saying, but at the same time,
these normal people don't get it.
There has to be more.
There has to be more context.
Yeah, you can't. There does have to be a lot more context in that, and how we divulge this information and what's going on. But that's also, you know, I've been in that type of class before, when you get to around lunchtime and the instructor says, "So what do y'all want to do now?"
Oh yeah, those are, you're like, bro, what am I doing here? Why am I paying for this?
You tell me. I was hoping you would be prepared for what happens for the other 4 hours that I'm here.
Yeah, but like you and I saw it in the military too, though, man. And like, and I love this, like talking to more dudes from whatever military or whatever branch. It doesn't have to be Marine, Army, whatever. Everyone's seen that guy where they're teaching a class now, where they're teaching you a skill, but they don't even really know it. They're just teaching it because they're rank. You know what I mean? They're put in that BS leadership position, and you're a new guy, and you're like, oh, that corporal or that sergeant is teaching this class, and then you talk to another dude of that rank, and they're like, that guy's an idiot. Why is he teaching? I'm like, well, he was told to.
That's right.
Right? So it's very hard in this community.
I have experience with that as well, because I was able to teach within the Marine Corps, and I saw that where, you know, would have people who are much higher than me, and I would be explaining something like land nav to them, and they're like, what? You know, and I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, man, like, this is, you know, this, and this is what you're looking at or whatever. And it just shows you that is a culture of its own that kind of grows and goes from there. And but I really do support, because I've been asked this question and you know, talked with numerous people about it, and they're like, what do you think about people with no military experience teaching certain classes? And or like, what do you think, like talking earlier about other companies? And my easy motto, my easy answer is, go take all the training that you can.
Yeah.
You're going to learn two things. You're going to learn how to do it, or you're going to learn how not to do it. And sometimes the classes that I've been to, and my only takeaway was how not to do something, was the best class that I've been to, right? Because you proved to me without a shadow of a doubt that there's no way I'm doing that. Absolutely at all am I going to do that. And you showed me the perfect environment that it fails in and how that works. And so I really support a lot of the companies out there, even some of the guys on social media with these huge accounts and stuff, and they have no military experience whatsoever. I'm 100% supportive of their endeavors and efforts to get out there and teach, because I'll be honest with you, looking at the skill sets that they're displaying, those skill sets are legitimate. Those guys can shoot, they can run, they can do all kind of stuff. Now, would I be like, hey, we're about to go into fourth generational warfare, things are collapsing, I want you to be my squad leader? No, I'm probably not going to say that, right? Because we'd want somebody with the understanding of how to conduct certain things to take on that particular role. So there is that. But, when it comes to tactics, or what's tactical, that word is so misused and overused. And that kind of my litmus test of sorts in conversations is to say, okay, well, what does tactical mean? What are tactics? Define that for me. And it seems to be like pornography. You can't really describe it, but you know what it is when you see it, type of deal. Mm-hmm. And that's generally the best, definition that I'm given. But I'm like, okay, here's the deal. Here's where we break down to, and this is why it's important to teach and go back to it, is, you can teach people how to shoot. You can teach people how to patch bullet holes or whatever. But when we start talking about the tactical aspect of it, we have to teach them how to think. Yeah. Right? And it's not a gut instinct. It's like, well, you're born with it or not. No, that's not true. It's scientific. We know that it's scientific. You can coach someone and teach them on how to develop a tactical mindset and how to generally make the correct choice more than not. Because that is dynamic situations, no matter what they are. A gunfight, natural disaster, whoever, whatever. All of those, I treat them the same, because they represent a collection of ever-evolving problems. Mm-hmm. And when you have a collection of ever-evolving problems, you don't just make one right decision, and that's the decision that wins the day. You generally are having to make 20, 30, 40 decisions, and those have to be towards the correct vector every time. They may not be the perfect answer, right? Because the enemy of good is perfect, but they need to be decisive in nature, and they need to go with the flow of understanding how the outcome is going to present itself. And that is something that I've learned over the years, that you need to try to develop the ability to understand. Everybody likes to use the OODA loop. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like you heard about classic Boyd cycle and all that. I've heard it a million times. And I was like, OODA loop, okay. I observe, I orient, I decide, and I act. And I'm like, what the hell am I doing? Like, what does that even mean? So then I started thinking of understanding the OODA loop is not really a circle on a piece of paper. If you could imagine, I know we're on audio, so it's difficult for people to see this or imagine, but if you could take that piece of paper and fold you could turn it now to the side, you would actually see that it would look a lot more like a slinky. Yep. Right? It's elongated, and it's showing you decision making over time, because as we get to that next rotation of that ring and that slinky, what we have done has now had an impact into the surrounding, and the other individuals involved, good or bad, are reacting. They're reacting, right? And so now their data is changing, their feedback is changing, and we're in a constant state of being fluid, where the first scenario, the first situation is not the scenario we see now. We have both put some type of feedback into the environment, and now things are going to change. And so I can't just make that one decision and stop. I have to continue going on basically autopilot, if you will. I hate to use that term, but going on that ability to perceive and all the way to the end. Whatever the end is, the end state has to be found. And that tactical decision making is what makes that up. And it's important for people to try to explore that and try to develop that. It's important to try to play, I wouldn't say games, so to speak, but to challenge themselves and think about, a concept of wargaming in some sort. And wargaming doesn't have to be sand table exercises at the battalion level or whatever. It can be yourself just thinking about, okay, if this were to happen, this is some of the things that I would do. All right, well, let's take some of the things I said I would do and let's start throwing problems at them. And then I say, oh, no, that's not going to work. I need to come up with something better than that. And then trying to do that. And then if you got a group of buddies, right, and you guys train together, and that's kind of your squad, so to speak, do the same thing with them. Mm-hmm. Start gaming with them and start looking at your practices and start it could be as simple as going and breaking out the Ranger handbook, or going and break out any type of tactical manual or field manual and starting to do immediate action drills, starting to do battle drills and practice. Okay, here's breaking contact, here's react contact, here's a peel left, peel right. Here's how we would think about establishing a supporting base of fire, and then fire and movement or fire and maneuver, and rehearse some of those things. And while you're rehearsing it, someone could say, well, if we did this would turn out better. And everybody's like, you know what? They'll throw rocks at him because that's not what the Ranger manual says. We have to do it this way.
Yeah.
You don't do that.
Yeah.
You say, hey, you know what, man? Yeah. Let's try it and see what happens. And if it works, then you incorporate that into your practice. And then, you keep on going from there. And that's one of the really big things that I learned was getting to the autonomous, and developing that autonomy between, whoever you're working with, that you can say, because I honestly, man, I've seen it both in the military and both in law enforcement. Law enforcement was kind of some of the most egregious, examples. One guy would go and like, okay, well, I went to this FBI class and they bring back a new way to clear rooms. And I'm like, I highly doubt it's new. You know what I mean? I hate to be that way, but, in that, when the wars started, diving down and going away, a lot of people started to look for more relevancy in training and trying to reinvent things. And I'm not saying that all of them weren't good. I'm just saying that, once you look at it, not all of them were relevant. Not all of them were better just because it was new. And my thing was, okay, bring back something from the schoolhouse and then let's tear it apart.
Yeah.
Right? Because if it really is that great, it should survive anything that we're going to throw at it. Because that's one of the worst things. We've always done it this way. It's always worked for us. That's going to get you killed. It doesn't
I
matter
hate that line, man. It's always been that way.
Yeah, and we should be, like I said, we should be reflexive to the point where we can say, okay, let's not hang on to a certain doctrine. If it's a sacred cow, let's slaughter it. Let's find a better way forward and try to develop it. And that's kind of what I'm about, no matter what we're doing. And I tell people, like I told you earlier, if you find a better way to do something in a particular skill set, come and show me.
That's awesome.
I will steal your moves every single time. If you show me something that works better than what I do, I will take it and I will use it. And, if I find something that works better than that, I will take it and I will use it. And I'm going to continue to try to develop things in that nature. And, things I did 10 years ago is not the way I do it today. And hopefully in 10 years from now, they're not going to be the way I do them right now.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, and that's like the best approach, man. And that's what I mean for out of uniform for all the prepared citizens. You're in the best scenario because, like I said earlier, you can make your own SOP. You can evolve annually. You can learn something else and make it become your doctrine instead of being in a unit, in a uniform, with an agency where they're like, that's not policy, and you repeat the same crap every year, or you don't do things properly because, like we said, it's politicized, or they're making it more inclusive, or whatever the case may be. But no, man, I really like your approach, Lance, with all of it, and it's sick to see, man, that you're blending it not just from the shooting side, like we said. You're doing survival, you're doing bushcraft, you're doing fieldcraft, you're doing and the big thing, the medical too. Are you doing, because again, you have a full-time job like most people who are in this space trying to build a brand. Are you, for your classes, would you say it's 50-50 medical with the bushcraft survival, or are you mostly teaching medical? Because it's like,
no, medical's probably just, it's like one of the 7 things that's going on there. Okay. Some of my most popular classes are what I call austere applications, the land nav. Mm-hmm. Dude, land nav is huge. Everybody loves it. Tracking, people love it. The survival and bushcraft, and honestly, I'm very drawn to that. I enjoy that activity, and I like getting out there and doing it anyways. But, when I have medical classes come up, people generally jump all over that. There's a lot of people that like to get in,
that's awesome
to doing that. And that's kind of cool, man. And what you were talking about a minute ago was that, you said you have the ability now to come up with your own SOP.
Yeah, dude.
And I want people to really take that home with them.
You can make up your own training plan. You can make up your own objectives annually and decide, okay, this is the dude I'm going to get medical from. This is the dude I'm going to get for survival from. This is the shooting I'm going to get. Or, I'm dialed in on shooting. I need to really focus on medical for the next 6 months. You can make your own training plan. You don't have some loser in battalion telling you what you're doing.
Exactly. And I warn people, and this kind of ruffles people's hair because we don't like to be questioned on our own successes and failures. We talked about that. And what I take away from that is by explaining certain things where, like what I was taught in the modern military, and probably you were very close to the same doctrine, more than likely, the doctrine of the West and how to fight war. I have to ask people, well, did it work?
No.
Yeah,
but we're always, or I would laugh and be like, no, it didn't. And then the policy we were taught, we didn't do. And as soon as you come back, they're like, okay, that didn't work, but the war is over. We're going back to policy. Like, that's a ridiculous answer.
Yep. And so my thing is this, is that if you are out there, you're just an everyday person, don't think that you have to, develop yourself as the modern American warrior. You don't have to go out and buy a plate carrier and a bump helmet and nods and operate like you're on SEAL Team 6 and all that kind of stuff, because I'll be honest with you, a lot of people are moving away from that for good reason. We're going to be lighter, go back to, light infantry tactics, even gear. I personally don't run a plate carrier in my gear. I know a lot of people find that insane. I'm completely fine with it. There's very few situations where I would now see myself putting on a plate carrier to have to go and do some type of work. I want to be lightweight. I want to be more, reconnaissance, light profile. I want to be not seen, not heard type of application in everything I'm doing. And, that's just me on that aspect. It doesn't mean that's what other people have to do, but I find a lot of credence in the doctrine to support that in the training and the problem solving. But, you can be an everyday dude and start figuring out basic concepts of fighting, right? And you can research, you can study, whatever, and you don't have to just copy what is out there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Now, there's some things to take away from it and say, okay, I completely understand this is probably the best way to perform an ambush, what position it is and what style it is. But at the same time, what I learned was that there was a lot of infallibility there when it came to the doctrine that we were using. And looking at the other doctrines around the world, they know what we're doing. It's not a secret to them. And other countries and other places are preparing for war with us, and they're planning on using our doctrine against us. And so I talk about this author a lot. A guy named H. John Poole, and his writings are amazing. If you want to start with one, it's called Phantom Soldier. Read that book. It'll change your life. It is an introspective study that goes all the way from the Japanese in World War II all the way up to the NBA and Viet Cong in Vietnam, and how basically they embraced the art of war when it comes to squad-based warfare. And that's really what it's based upon, and how the squad can fight small irregular elements, and how the squad can fight even larger professional elements and succeed in doing that by the strengths that they give each other. And so that's kind of what that's about. And I would say do that because, if you're out there saying, okay, well, we're going to do nothing but practice a react to contact drill, right? And so a lot of times doctrine tells us if that ambush is less than 50 meters away and or within hand grenade range,
you're fighting through.
The element that's in the element that's in immediate contact is going to push towards that kill zone and push towards that enemy, right? That's what it tells us. Well, what if I knew that that's what you were going to do? What if I established a separate ambush and I hit you in the first kill zone, knowing that you would attack through? I gave with defense and depth, and you find yourself in a fire sack. I knew you were going to do it. I played you at your own game. That's what I'm getting at with this, is that you have to be able to evolve that skill set on the small level all the way to the large level and choose what it is that you're going to incorporate and how you're going to use it, and make sure that it's just not copy-paste because some modern military told you to do it. And I'm going to tell you, the modern military and even into other agencies or whatever, logistics is the name of the game for them. They're going to want to have the most logistics in the field. We as regular people need to learn how to get away from that and how to say, hey, I can't supply myself like they can. We also need to see the weakness that exists in forces who are using logistics as their main. That's their centers of gravity and their critical vulnerability. We got to realize that, hey, to keep a modern army in the field requires fuel, requires water, requires all classes of supply to keep them going. What happens if they're denied those? If they go down to bare knuckles without resupply, how will they perform? You think about like on the morale level, how long would they stay in the fight? How long will you go to places like Georgia where we talked about the swamps and the heat and all that kind of stuff, wearing a plate carrier, wearing a helmet and trudge around here in July? Dude, welcome to the jungle, baby. If you think that that's going to work for you, I have some bad news. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to turn out well. So, and that's the thing. I'm not saying, hey, you should be preparing to fight, a modern army. I'm not saying you should be prepared to fight law enforcement. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you should realize all walks of life, all different vectors, and say, hey, if I ever had to fight them, how would I do it? You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. If it ever came to me, how would I make this happen, and start developing, plans that are based upon that, and that includes everything from everyday defense of yourself all the way up to thinking of worst case scenarios and trying to encompass and come up with a doctrine or certain doctrines that are concentric. They flow together, they make sense, and they grow, and that skill set is encompassed within that, so that if the situation changes, you're not really switching gears that much. Mm-hmm. You're just doing it with a different group on the other end. So.
Yeah, and this is something I've talked about a lot with Ian, like from Bushplaid. We've talked about this a lot, saying like the modern army, the GWAT vet, the bro vet that everyone loves, is so reliant on a supply chain, is so reliant on a rear echelon. And the everyday prepared citizen, I'm like, you don't have a rear echelon coming. You don't have someone else to support you. You're lucky if you have a group of buddies that are, within driving distance to you. You need to just learn all these skills on your own. And that's what I mean, that people can cherry pick what skills they need to learn, not what's sexiest from Instagram. They're like, what do I need to help me be the most prepared I can be? And I love, dude, your approach with medical specifically, because like I said, it's not seen as sexy, because like we said, this whole time we've seen it on the law enforcement or emergency response side. It's dumped to the side. Unless you're an actual paramedic, everyone else, they dump it. They're like, well, I'm not a paramedic. I'm going to wait for Lance the medic to show up. I'm like, yeah, but we can't let Lance in. Like, there's still someone getting shot around here. I probably need a trauma bag on me because I'm finding kids now. So
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I've even had conversations where I disagree on seeing what's going on. And I've had someone say, hey, you can't go in there. It's a crime scene. And I said, well, are they dead? And they say, well, we don't know. And I say, well, outstanding. Until they are dead, they are my patient. And this is not what happens if there's not a murder because the person doesn't die, dummy.
Yeah.
Let me in there and fix it. Yeah. And maybe we can change this. Yeah. So it does. It takes some humility and some thought, to get to that level. And I agree with you 100% on that.
So. And you're definitely pushing it the way it should be pushed, Lance. So whatever you're doing, keep on trucking, brother. Don't stop. Like, this attitude will eventually make it normal in a culture that's completely toxic right now on the uniform side. And then the non-uniform side, people just want to band-aid shit by consuming. They're not consuming training or skills. They're consuming gear, items.
That's right. That's right. And I'll tell anyone out there, listen, man, if you work, full time in some type of uniform, I don't want you to take offense to what I'm saying, right? You need to be humble enough to look at it and say, you know what, dude, there's some truth to what's going on there. And, if you find yourself having to support those actions and really start thinking about why you're doing what you're doing, and say, hey, you know what, we are not. No one's perfect. We all make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. The people I work with make mistakes all the time. It just occurs, and we try to learn from that best we can. So try to take yourself out of that and look at the big picture. And, then individuals that, are not, they're just everyday people. I need you to realize something extremely important, that at the end of the day, nobody's coming to save you.
Yeah.
They're not.
No one is. No.
It's not. And if you think that there's these superheroes out there in uniform and that they're white knights and infallible, I'm going to guarantee you that's not the truth. It's not. For every person who wants to be on top of their game and they're driving, you're going to find 10 who are not. And when the metal hits the meat, they're probably going to back out and say, nah, And we've seen it with, medical does it on a daily basis. We've seen it with these active killer situations where they don't go in.
Yeah.
It's not like it's something that we could, that's happening. It's not conjecture. It's happening. Mm-hmm. And so that's just kind of where we are. But the biggest thing is you got to realize you're not alone. You've watched the news, you look at social media, you look at all this stuff, and you're going to feel like I'm the minority. What I'm doing is weird. It's not. Don't just forget all that. Okay. Do what you want to do because you want to be a free person. There's nothing more dangerous than a person who is able to start thinking and trying to figure out what's going on around them, and then trying to say, you know what, I'm not interested in that. I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to be, I want to live this way, and this is what I want to preserve. Nothing's more dangerous than that. So start with that, start developing that skill set behind it. And once you get that skill set going, then start implementing with gear and tools to fit in with the tactics that you're using. Learn from my mistakes, learn from your mistakes, learn from everybody else's mistakes, where most of us probably have an entire room of gear that we don't use anymore because we bought this shit and was like, wow, this is not what I thought it was going to be. I thought I had to have it, and now it's completely useless to me. And try to do that, especially if you're on a budget. If you're, can't afford all these things or whatever, like most of us, you work, you have bills, you got to feed a family, whatever. Try to approach it like that and try to really step away from that consumerism and say, no, you got to have this. No, you got to have this. You don't. My thing is that I want to be to the position where if something bad is happening and I don't have anything on me, I could dip into a hardware store and collect 5 to 6 items and walk out and say, I'm probably going to make it for a while with this right here until I can improve my position somewhere else. That's where we need to be. And I even tell you, hey, test it out, go and try to find the limited amount of things you can and go spend the night in the woods and see how far you get with it and learn from it and keep on going from there, So that's just my takeaway. You're not alone. Feel free to reach out to me anytime, whether it's email. You can reach me at info@selousdynamics.com. You can go to our website, www.selousdynamics.com. On Facebook, I hate Facebook, but I have a guy who manages Facebook, so you may not ever hear from us if you contact us on Facebook. And then obviously like Instagram and all that kind of stuff, you can reach out on there as well. And, I will chat, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I'm a guy that I don't know you, but you randomly reach out and you're like, hey, this, I'll be like, hey man, all right, have you thought about this? I don't mind having those conversations with people and trying to help them figure out stuff and kind of go from there with it. So
thanks for everything today, Lance. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat. And oh man, I could talk to you for friggin' more hours. There's so much information, dude, that you have that I want to share, but I appreciate you making the time for us this week.
Anytime, man. And if you're interested in training and you want to come to us, definitely come to us. And if you're interested, like in the place that you live, and it's like, well, that's too far and I got a group of people, contact me, man. I'm interested in coming to your part of the world. We can establish a class out there. You can host us and we'll bring whatever you want to. We'll custom make it and all that kind of stuff. And it's fun to be able to get out there and do that. So, but yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. I hope we can do it again and we can get into even more specific, especially if anyone has, requests about certain things they want to talk about or they want to get into, I'm all about it. So
yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for staying tuned to another episode. This has been Hard Times, Strong Men, creating a better class of man. Stay savage and stay in the fight.